Hi, Kansas Bushman here again. Today I want to talk to you about making and using char cloth. Now, what is char cloth? Char cloth, in definition, is basically very thin charcoal. Basically what it consists of is a piece of cotton material like this old t-shirt, or you can use jean material, and then you place squares of that material into an enclosed container like this Altoids can, and then allow it to set over a fire to where it is in the container and it is not burning when you put the container in the fire. And then you let it set, and when you open it back up, you should have a very black piece of cotton material. This will in turn accept a spark very easily and very quickly, just like charcoal that you would put in your grill. Now I'm going to get into how to make it, but first we need to talk some components. Excuse me. Now, like I said, this is just a piece of a t-shirt that I cut the sleeves out of, and it is mostly cotton fiber. Like I said, you can use jean material, you can use pretty much any natural fiber, but cotton is the best. Cut it into little squares and place it into preferably an Altoids can. Now I have to use the reflection from behind me to point out the little pinhole in the top, and I'll point out what that's good for a little bit later, but the pinhole is essential. So cut some squares, load them in here, and then you just set it in the fire. Amongst the coals is the best, because you're actually, if you set it on sticks and all that kind of thing, if the sticks burn all the way through, it could drop into the coals and then you could lose it. So amongst the coals towards the edge of your fire pit or whatever you're using the container to build the fire in, just make sure it's out towards the edge so you can find your Altoids can. Now when it's in the fire, you're going to see a lot of smoke coming out amongst or from the edges and also out of that pinhole. You also may see flames. That is just fine. The only thing is, before you put it in the fire, you want to make sure that this container is clamped down and shut very tightly, because if it's left open, flames could get in there and start the pieces of material on fire. If it's closed and you see a small flame coming out of the top or from the edges, that is just fine. You want to leave the container in there for about 10-15 minutes. If you have a particularly large load of the material in there, maybe a little bit more than 15 minutes, but no more than 20, because otherwise it's just going to get way done. After that, you should have a piece of material that looks like this. Now this piece is kind of small, but it's the only one I could dig out right then. But that's exactly what it should look like. If it doesn't look like that, maybe it still has some color. Like this is very dark to begin with, but it has a very light inside. If the inside of the material is still very light, you want to put it back in there and just let it set some more. Now that's pretty much it for making it. It's very simple. All you really need is a little bit of material and an Altoids can, and of course a fire to begin with. I would suggest, before you go out hunting or into a situation where you could become lost and you may need a fire, make some before you leave home, like in your fireplace or fire pit or anywhere, and then carry it with you. Now you got it out in the field, you need a fire, and how do you use the char cloth? Well, that's very simple. What we have here is a few rocks. These are all flint rocks, a couple pieces of obsidian, a piece of chert. I'm not real sure what this red rock is, and this is another piece of obsidian, and then this is a quartz rock. I don't suggest using quartz because it does work, but it doesn't throw off very many sparks, and the spark is what lights the char cloth, and I'll get into more of that later. And you want to have a striker. I have two of these here, one's a little bit bigger, and this represents tinder. Tinder could be maybe some jute twine like this that's kind of roughed up. Could be the inside of cedar bark when you scrape it. Could be anything. Dead grass is another idea. And you can do it the old-fashioned way like this. And when you do it the old-fashioned way with the flint rock and the striker, you want to hold the rock like this in your fingers and then put the char cloth right here, press it down with your thumb, strike, and you should have a spark. After that, you get the piece of char cloth going, and then you put it into your tinder just like this. And what you want to do to prep the tinder is take it and put it in your hand, kind of make like a cup, put your 2 fingers down in there and rub it around a little bit, and you should have what looks like a bird's nest. So this is called a bird nest. You want to set the char cloth down in there. Keep your hands away from the bottom at all times, because if it ignites in your hands, you're going to have a very serious burn potentially. So you want to keep your hands out of the way, give it some oxygen, and then once it really starts to smoke, put it down into maybe your grass or whatever you have there, and continue blowing it until it ignites. So that's how basically you make a fire the old-fashioned way. Another way that is also, it's a little bit quicker, is just take a piece of char cloth and set it on the ground or amongst some grass. I would suggest putting it into another tinder bundle like that. And then if you have a fire steel, just take and strike the piece of char cloth with the fire steel, and it's a lot quicker. So that is another method of doing it. Another thing I would suggest when you are making and dealing with char cloth is having a possible bag. The possible bag is the place where you're going to keep your rocks, your strikers, the tin which you make the char cloth in, the piece of char cloth, or the pieces of char cloth that you've already made in your tinder. Now after that, you want to carry this with you in the field, and if you find like dead grass and stuff along the way, it's also an excellent container to put, or it's a excellent place to put that so that you don't have to leave it behind. And basically that's all there is to it. It's very simple to do, but it's a source of fire when you may really need it in the future. So anyway, if you have any questions, feel free to comment or inbox me, and I'll answer your questions as quick as I can to the best of my ability. So thank you. Take it easy.